for the United States, written in the Book of Fate, Vice President of the United States, Her Excellency Ms. Kamala Harris, Second Gentleman Douglas Craig Emhoff, White House Chief of Staff Jeffrey Dunstan Zients, the Honorable Director of Intelligence Avril Haines, the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe General Christopher Cavoli, Director of the National Security Agency Timothy Hugh, Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency Jeffrey Cross, Commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet Samuel John Papato, Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation Christopher Asher Ray, Director of the Central Intelligence Agency William Joseph Burns, Other Admiral Mr. Stephen Thomas Kohler, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence Michael Ray Turner, and James Andrew Himes, Chair of the Senate Intelligence Mr. Mark Robert Warner, Senate of the Armed Services Committee for Nuclear Deterrent Strategy and Arms Control John Francis Reed, Roger Frederick Wicker, of Global Operations General Michael Eric Kurilla, Speaker of the House Mr. James Michael Johnson, House Majority Leader Stephen Joseph Scalise, House Minority Leader Hakeem Sekou Jeffries, Senate Majority Leader Mr. Charles Ellis Schumer, Secretary of Energy Jennifer Mulhern Granholm, Secretary of Education Miguel Angel Cardona, Secretary of Veteran Affairs Dennis Richard McDonough, Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Nicolas Mayorkas, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, Assistant Secretary of State for Educational and Cultural Affairs Lee Ann Satterfield, Agency for International Development Samantha Jane Power, President pro tempore of the Senate Chair and Senate Appropriations Committee Ms. Patricia Lynn Murray, Vice Chair, Senate of Appropriations Susan Margaret Collins, Secretary of the Treasury Janet Louise Yellen, the Attorney General Merrick Brian Garland, Secretary of the Interior Deborah Ann Holland, Secretary of Agriculture Thomas James Vilsack, Secretary of Commerce Gina Marie Raimondo, Secretary of Labor Julie Su, Secretary of Health and Human Services Xavier Becerra, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Marcia Louise Fudge, Secretary of Transportation Peter Paul Montgomery Buttigieg, Senators Marco Antonio Rubio, Thomas Hawley Tuberville, Elizabeth Ann Warren, Willard Mitt Romney, Randall Howard Paul, Thomas Bryan Cotton, John Neely Kennedy, Kristen Elizabeth Gillibrand, Lindsey Allen Graham, Rafael Edward Cruz, and Tulsi Gabbard. United States Special Operations Command Richard D. Clark, Joseph James McManaman, Brian Patrick Fenton, Christopher Paul Meyer, the highest 4 female 4-star generals of the Navy, Admiral Lisa Frankety, Army General Laura Richardson, Coast Guard Commandant Admiral Linda Fagan, Air Force General Jacqueline Obos, Secretary of the Army Christine Elizabeth Wormuth, Secretary of the Air Force, Frank Kendall III. Secretary of the Navy, Carlos del Toro. Secretary of Defense, Honorable Mr. Lloyd Austin. Chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Michael Thomas McCall. Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Ben Cardin, and Ranking Member James E. Risch. Army Vice Chief of Staff, Daniel Bartlett Allen. James J. Bingus, Lieutenant General John R. Evans Jr. The highest-ranking military officer and chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Honorable Charles Quinton Brown. Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, National Security Advisor Jacob Jeremiah Sullivan, and His Excellency the Secretary of State Anthony John Blinken.